Trust is collapsing in the job market. Candidates don't believe job postings are real, employers are drowning in AI-generated applications, and job boards are caught in the middle. Can job boards evolve before something else replaces them? Keep listening to find out. Support for this podcast comes from Smart Recruiters. Are you looking to supercharge your hiring? Meet Winston, Smart Recruiters' AI-powered companion. I've had a demo of Winston. The capabilities are extremely powerful, and it's been crafted to elevate hiring to a whole new level. This AI sidekick goes beyond the usual assistant, handling all the time-consuming admin work so you can focus on connecting with top talent and making better hiring decisions. From screening candidates to scheduling interviews, Winston manages it all with AI precision, keeping the hiring process fast, smart, and effective. Head over to smartrecruiters.com and see how Winston can deliver superhuman results.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 765 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. Job boards have been connecting candidates with employers for over 30 years, but the relationship that made them work is fundamentally breaking down. Candidates are getting frustrated by applying for roles that may already be filled or that have been taken off the market, while employers are receiving thousands of identical AI-generated applications they can't meaningfully evaluate. The job boards sitting between them are trapped in business models that reward volume over quality, which only makes the problems worse. The result is a trust crisis that threatens the entire ecosystem. When neither side believes the process is fair, the whole system starts to unravel. So, what would it actually take for job boards to rebuild that trust and stay relevant? My guest this week is Lou Goodman, a job board strategy expert who recently partnered with Jobico to produce a major new report on the future of job boards. In our conversation, she explains why the industry is stuck repeating the same patterns, what job boards can learn from other platform businesses, and whether evolution or extinction is the more likely outcome. Hi Lou, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, lovely to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Please, can you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Yes, my name is Lou Goodman. I am a marketing strategy consultant these days. I've worked in and around recruitment for a really long time. I started my career at places like Barker's and TMP, and then worked at a large media agency called Mediacom, running accounts like the Army and Shell Recruitment. And most recently, I was at Monster until last year. My last role there was as heading up the global B2B team.
Fantastic. So as a consultant, you have just authored an incredibly comprehensive report about the job boards and the future of job boards. Just tell us a little bit about the report and what you've written.
Yes, so this has been in partnership with Jobico. And actually, it came about after I met Martin Lentz from Jobico at Job Boards Connect last year. And we were chatting during our breakout session, and he asked me to write a couple of articles for him. And then he said he would like to continue this. And I said to him that I had been thinking about the future of job boards after that Job Boards Connect meeting. And he was really interested in, all the challenges they were facing rather than the future, because it's, I don't think anyone can predict the future. Martin was really interested in that topic. And then I kind of came back to him and said, I've been thinking about this and I'm not sure an article is enough space. And then I wrote 20,000 words about it. So yeah, it went quite differently from being an article, but it really was, the inspiration for it came from that Job Boards Connect breakout session. I mean, obviously, when I left Monster, I'd been thinking for quite a long time after that. I had a lot of time on my hands and was thinking what had happened with Monster and, the challenges that they faced. But there was a comment that was made, or a couple of comments that were made in this breakout session where Martin and I were talking about the need to focus on candidates and candidate experience and getting the right balance, and, the role of why thinking about your brand is important. And there were a few comments along the lines of, well, you always balance, you always prioritize the employer needs over candidate needs. And that just really stayed with me in the days afterwards. That was kind of what started me thinking about it, because Monster had always, I think from Jeff Taylor onwards, they'd always had the focus on, get the candidates and then the employers come because you have that. But also from my time working at Mediacom, I was at Mediacom when Facebook launched, when LinkedIn was, LinkedIn had, not when I joined after that, but I was out there for 10 years through the growth of these platforms. And I just remember thinking, I just don't think that's how two-sided marketplaces work. And that was really kind of a catalyst for it. And then, I just kept kind of thinking about it and working on it and kind of organized it into this. And Martin was very interested. Jobberco were the perfect partner for it. And, they wanted to work with it on me. And then I spent 2 to 3 months kind of writing it.
Job boards were always about the candidate first when they first launched. And if that thinking, the opposite thinking, has become pervasive, it kind of does explain a lot about what we're looking at today. So, let's sort of dive in, because I'm really interested to sort of get your insights around a number of things with job boards. So I suppose the first question is, why do we need job boards today? What are they for? And how has that changed from maybe a few years ago?
Yeah, it is a great question. Another thing that I thought about with this report was there was a conversation, as I'm sure happens at a lot of job board events all over the world, that are job boards dying? And I was thinking, well, should they exist? If we think about flipping that question on its head, should they die out or should they exist? And I do think that we do need job boards. I think the work is more complex than it's ever been. There's, fluid careers, hybrid working or remote working, and portfolio employment, and people are moving around much more quickly. People want different things from employers now. And so I think there is a need for a trusted intermediary. I think that need is higher than ever. But I do think that job boards don't automatically kind of keep the right to be that intermediary. I think there is an evolution that is needed. There's a lot changing. The economy is really tough at the moment. Job openings aren't tracking GDP anymore for, I think, the first time ever. Technology, is bringing in loads of changes with an awful lot of workforce reductions planned. And I read in some research, and the sources in the report, but last year, 1 million UK workers left over flexibility with the changing kind of flexibility needs that they have, people wanting different things. And the pandemic, of course, changed everybody's idea of what was possible with that. And, what we've got to is where kind of trust is kind of collapsing on both sides. And I think we're in this kind of perfect storm at the moment. It feels like, of all of those things going on. And then the thing that used to be the proxy for quality, which was volume. Generally, if you got enough applications, you would find people. And that's kind of really broken down. And so I think that that's the key challenge at the moment. I think one of the other changes as well has been around less audience ownership that the job boards have. And so when hiring returns, because obviously we all want the economy to get better and hopefully for hiring to get better, our job board's going to find themselves trying to monetize an audience that they don't have anymore.
I kind of really want to, dive a bit deeper into the whole trust aspect of this. And I suppose before we do that, just to kind of set things up really, what promise is it that job boards are kind of implicitly making, I suppose, both to employers and to candidates? And where is that breaking down at the moment?
That's a really interesting question, isn't it, as well? So I think that the implicit promise is that they will connect qualified candidates with relevant opportunities. And there's kind of two challenges in there. So, I think the name itself, job board, is a promise in of itself, probably mostly to candidates. It's, find a job here. But there are other things. So, I think the job posting as an artifact really is saying that, this opportunity is genuine, that it's accurate, and it is what's needed. And I think the implicit promise in that, on top of those things, is that it's worth your time, because applying to jobs takes a very long time these days, particularly when there's a job scarce market. It means that you're having to apply to lots of jobs. And so finding a job is like having a job. There's also the search and the matching element of it, which is saying that, these results, the promise is, if you put these limited search results in, like a job title and location, we're going to serve you the best results that we've got available, which means that our rankings actually serve your interest. And then there's other things like job alerts where, we'll surface the most relevant opportunities for you. And then for employers, I think the big one for employers is that, application volume in the past has been a meaningful quality signal. And things like screening tools, people put in, if you can put in questions, there's kind of an expectation then that would people be able to override that and apply anyway. And I think kind of where that you see that kind of breaking down most often, which is the ongoing challenge that job boards have, is when it comes to the moment of application, that's when the transaction should complete. And it should be that both sides are, satisfied that the transaction is completed in a way that it doesn't mean you'll get a job, but that's a real job I'm applying for, and this is a candidate who matches my requirements.
And I suppose it kind of really plays into the problem that we have with trust at the moment. I mean, trust really, to me, is one of the biggest themes of this year, and it's certainly a big theme of the podcast at the moment. I mean, it seems to be missing everywhere from hiring at the moment. What is it that sort of drives trust down, or more importantly, drives trust up in the job board experience?
I think there's something I introduced in the report called Procedural Justice, which was something I learned about on a leadership course I went on a few years ago. And it's the feeling that something is fair, even if you don't get the outcome that you want. I think that seems to be missing on both sides. I would say mostly for candidates, because it's a lot more personal for candidates. Getting a job helps them pay their mortgage, feed their families. So that can feel maybe feel a lot more personal. But I think what drives trust is there is the transparency element. So why am I seeing this? Why am I seeing this candidate, and why am I seeing this job? How does the ranking work? What happens to my application? Why am I getting these candidates sent through? There are quality signals as well. So, match confidence, seriousness indicators that could be gathered by job boards on both sides. And I think that a key one these days is, what do I get for sharing data? Again, I think that's maybe more on the candidate side, but what am I getting for this? Accountability is a key one that we see in other platforms. So are platforms going to act on systemic bad behaviors or fake jobs or fake applicants? But I think quite often it's more about fairness mattering more than the outcomes.
It's interesting because, like you, I've been to lots of job board conferences over the years. And I think that there was one I went to a few years ago where I could just really see that shift, where people weren't talking about candidates or even employers anymore. They were talking about traffic and trading traffic with each other. And that to me just seemed to be the beginning of the thin end of the wedge to where we are now. Which I suppose leads me on to my next question. I mean, the problems are sort of pretty obvious if you're an employer using job boards, or from a candidate perspective as well. If the problems are obvious, why are job boards stuck repeating the same old patterns rather than evolving?
It's a really tough market for everybody at the moment, even though there is, more flow of candidates than ever. If employers don't want that many candidates, you can't monetize it. And I think at the moment, and I went through this at Monster, and I wasn't in the position of having to make the really tough calls, but making any changes that reduce short-term revenue often feels really, really impossible. When you're firefighting, it feels really hard to stop focusing on fire prevention when you're in the middle of firefighting. And what happens then quite often is that short-term fixes become kind of long-term patterns. And so I think what happens is that rational short-term decisions kind of can still contribute to a long-term crisis. But I think at the moment it's really about how tough it is, but also it's a big shift from quantity to quality. It's a really big change, and it can be really hard to make those changes when any quality filter that you put in can reduce down, you get fewer applications, which means you take a revenue hit, and it's uncertain whether these things are going to work. You're going into a new area. Are customers going to want those things? And I think we also have to remember that Indeed and LinkedIn really, and in markets like Germany, Stepstone, they set the tone with what they do. And if they're not using the leverage that they have to put some of the things in that would help drive better quality, like salary, for example, is a great way to help people understand whether it's the right role for them. But if you have the market leaders not putting that in place, and that's not something, you want to put that in place, but that's not something that employers want to put in place themselves, it becomes really hard to do it. So I think it's a lot of job boards can see this, but, it's revenue is really under pressure. Clients are cutting budget, and the day-to-day just really takes over. And that was, when I was at Monster, everybody was working so hard to try and turn things around. There was lots of stuff that everybody wanted to do, that we knew we wanted to do, but it just was so hard to do it.
The quantity quality thing is interesting because I can kind of remember back to economic dips, recessions in the past, and job boards always kind of struggled with that flip from actually, the number of applications that we're sending across is now not the most relevant thing. I mean, it never was in the first place, but then what's happened is the economy's always turned and it has become kind of relevant. So they've kind of sort of plowed through it. But with AI doing what AI is doing, that's not, the application issue is now permanent, I think. So, I mean, AI is everywhere in hiring, or it's certainly talked about everywhere in hiring at the moment. I mean, is it fixing problems? Is it making things worse? What's going on from a job board perspective?
I think it's both at the same time, as we find with so many things at the moment. So it is fixing some problems, but I think that, if procedural justice is missing, for example, then actually AI just helps you to scale injustice. I think that what it's doing is it's amplifying weaknesses. And so therefore, quite often it's just making dysfunction more efficient. So I think that there are some, AI could help to fix problems if there was, if there was a clear path to, if only we had something that could do this more efficiently. If we could have taken a human out of the loop, and that would help us here. But a lot of the problems are, they're kind of they're deeper than that. And I think that what we see with the volume problem at the moment, when candidates had AI tools that were put in their hands, we've seen this growth in the sea of sameness of applications that employers are with. But those tools, those AI applied tools, fill a need. Candidates wouldn't be using them if they weren't filling a need. I think, candidates have learned that it's a numbers game. And so that's where we're seeing, I think it's really amplifying weaknesses. But there are great opportunities with AI at the same time in how you can automate some things too. So, for example, keeping candidates more up to date should be easier than ever now with AI. Getting that right, how do you make sure that people understand? So I think it's both. I think for me, it's really the application. Yeah, it's devalued the application, which is, I think, the key problem that job boards and everybody is facing now, is that the application is not really as helpful as it was. So that's an AI exacerbated problem. How do we, I'm not sure that more AI, it just becomes a race to the bottom if we just keep adding in more AI without addressing that.
I think that's a really good point. And I think it's also funny because AI tends to solve a lot of problems that AI has caused as well, which doesn't really get us anywhere. So let's talk about what could change. So what do job boards actually control in this? And how can they use that to sort of build more value for themselves as part of the process?
Yeah, well, one of the key themes or key inspiration for the report is mentioned in the introduction is something called marketing myopia, which is making sure that, you're focusing on what your customers are really buying, and customers meaning candidates and employers. And really, I think there's a focus on applications because that's the mechanism through which the value gets created. But matching, sourcing and matching is the real product, or, that's what job boards are really doing. So I think if you look at it from one of the arguments I make is that if you don't have things like disposition data that help you understand more about the quality, then what you have to do is really get the value back into what you do control, which is up to the point of application. So there's a chapter where we look at other platforms and how they do it. And I think we need to take learnings from there. So, they have quality standards on both sides, and I think that's something that job boards haven't done in terms of, or maybe haven't gone as far as they could. And this might be more needed with employers, so as well as candidates, how do you crack down on fake applications? But how do you crack down on fake jobs? And that doesn't need to mean refusing jobs, but there are things like, when was it posted? How many times has it been reposted? How do you give people information? There are transparency requirements. So I know salary is obviously a really difficult one. And I do think that it's going to be very difficult for a lot of job boards to say that salary was mandatory unless Indeed or LinkedIn did that. But you could, for example, put a filter in that candidates could filter and only see jobs with salaries. So it becomes a choice. And then what you can do is report back to employers and say, at the moment, a lot of candidates might not use that filter because they would know how many jobs got cut out. But when it comes back to hopefully better hiring and the economy improves and everybody's rolling in money again, more might use it. But you use that as a data point to influence behavior. Accountability, I think showing on both sides, like how are you filtering out people that are maybe spamming applications. There was it was Lee Biggins at Job Boards Connect back in May last year, where I think they'd seen a candidate had submitted 325 applications in 24 hours. So they put something in place to limit, to manage that. And, transparency, over ranking. I mean, there's certain things, transparency, you don't want to be giving away all your IP and, how you do things, but telling people why they're seeing things and using behavior on both sides to help people understand that they're a match. And I think those things do become challenging because obviously they can risk revenue. But I think that if you aren't going to get disposition data, which I think is kind of flawed, you can't just look at disposition data anyway. There has to be more of a matching element and, then saying to employers, well, this is what you told us you wanted. So we're going to deliver you the people that you said you want. And here's all the things that we're going to do to make sure that they match. And then what's the value of these people?
It goes back to what you were saying right at the beginning. There is a role for job boards to be that trusted thing in the center, which candidates can trust that these are real jobs and their application is going to go to the actual employer. And the employers can trust that they're actually going to get applications from real people that fit their criteria. And it just seems like a space that we're desperate for someone to fill at the moment. So I suppose as a final question, I know you don't like predicting the future, but just your kind of opinion on what you're seeing. If we look ahead, do you think job boards will be able to adapt, or is something else going to come in and kind of replace them and sort of take that role that we've just been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have a crystal ball. I could make a lot of money if I had a crystal ball and could tell people this. I think the key thing is that the need isn't going anywhere. So it has to be the job boards or something has to come and replace it. I think maybe it might be a bit of both. I think I do quote someone else in the report called Thomas Ottawa. He coined a phrase called application tourism. You know, how a lot of the big tech companies keep coming in and out of saying that they're going to do recruitment. And so I think what makes me believe that job boards, this is really about an evolution of job boards rather than an extinction, is that if job boards have been around for a long time, it's 30 years, isn't it? Over 30 years.
Yeah. Don't make me feel old now.
No, it does make me
I can remember when lots of them launched, but yes, it's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember fighting to get job boards on media plans. And, this internet thing won't take off. Does make me feel very old. But, it's been a long time and someone hasn't come in and disrupted. And Thomas Otter has a great article on it about what the challenges are with doing that and why it isn't as easy as we'll just come in and do this. So I think the job boards are in the best position. They understand the market. They understand what it needs. They have the experience. They have the technology, and companies like Jobico are committed to keep evolving that technology. I've taken on a role of board advisory member on their advisory board for this, which is really exciting. But I think there are people that are really committed to moving this on. And I think that job boards are actually best place. It doesn't mean that there's not real challenges for all the reasons that we talked about in the previously, like legacy revenue, and you've got a running business. So in some cases, it is much easier for somebody new to come in that doesn't have all of that kind of history and baggage and, legacy revenue. But I still do believe that job boards have the knowledge and the history to be best placed to do it. And I do think that if someone was going to come in and change it, they would have disrupted it by now. But that's not to say that someone, won't come back in. I know you interviewed Jeff Taylor recently. I was at the TA Tech event where you interviewed him as well. He's someone who's got history. I mean, he arguably kind of started the category. So it might be like an ex-insider like Jeff that comes and changes things. But I do think disruption is coming. But I think job boards have a role to play, and I hope that enough of them can adapt.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how it all develops. Lou, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you for having me.
My thanks to Lou. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.